So, Merry Christmas to you all. It's, Judy, I think it's Christmas time in the Rockies. Matter of fact, as I look outside and see a blue sky and beautiful sunshine and know that a snowstorm's coming tonight. So I think that defines the system. So welcome to a Fireside Chat. And as you know, that each month we have an opportunity to discuss with you. And I always have a special guest that we bring in and that we have a conversation too. And this time my special guest is a very special guest. So after 60 years of marriage, this is my wife, Judy. Hi, Judy.
Hello, Bruce.
Say hi to the
Hello,
listeners
everyone.
today.
Glad you're here.
We are, in fact, glad that you're here. We're looking forward to this time together. We'll have a kind of a free-ranging conversation. We've got a couple of questions that people have asked, and we'll also have an opportunity that if, in fact, you have a question, on the screen, there's a little section called options, and when you click on that, there's a place where you can raise your hand. If you raise your hand, then our producer Elliot will know that you have that question, and we'll put you on screen so that we can hear your question, interact with you, and hopefully provide an answer. Mm-hmm. So that's part of the deal. So we're really, really excited about this growth step in retirement reformation and the opportunity to take another step to be in community together. So, joy to the world.
Right. Joy to the world.
Joy to the world. When a few years ago, I think it was back in, so it'd be 2016, I think, when we were in Israel. Mm-hmm. And remember, we were sitting on the side of the hill where the shepherds were.
I do.
And we looked out at what the shepherds would have seen. And we actually sang Joy to the World. Now, it was a totally different setting than what the shepherds had, but we could step into that. And so for each one of us to be able to step into, this joyous time, we know that this time is not joyous for everyone. That for some of us, it was a time when there were really sad experiences, a family breakup, a major disagreement, a death, an accident, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. And so we want to acknowledge that is true, but that whole idea of joy that we're going to talk about is kind of underlying all of that and is what God calls us to be almost regardless of our circumstances. So, as we kind of talked this morning at breakfast, what, when you think about joy, what comes to your mind?
Well, the fact that God commands me to be joyful all the time. He says, rejoice in me, rejoice always. And that means through the good times and the bad. And the reason for my rejoicing is that I know that He is taking care of me and that He promises that all things will work together for good.
All things will work together for good. And I don't know about your experience. You may be at a point in time when you're thinking to yourself, I'm not sure that's true. Mm-hmm. But our experience of Judy, you're what, 80?
83 next month.
80, yeah, just in a few days. And, I'm 81. And in our lives, we've had lots of joy, but we've also had sorrow. And in the midst of those sorrows, what I think we've had enough time to be able to see how things do work together.
Yes,
for good.
That's right.
We just had, 11 days of our son Brent being with us. Brent is a special needs and is just, he's 55 years old. I never thought I'd be old enough to have a 55-year-old and certainly wouldn't be married to somebody who had a 55-year-old.
Right, I agree. I thought the same.
And so, in our family, the journey that we've had with Brent mm-hmm. has been one of the things that has been very difficult at times, but it's also brought us amazing joy in ways that I would never have expected when we learned about his disability all these years ago. We'll talk about that just a little bit.
When Brent was born, it was obvious to us that he was disabled in some way. And the doctors told us that we'd have to wait till he was 2.5 for a final diagnosis because he had to develop a while so that they could see what he'd be capable of. And when he was 2.5, we were told after a thorough go through between the doctors and Brent that he would never walk or talk and would have to be fully cared for either by us or institutionally for the rest of his life. And you want me to keep going with
I
that
do.
story?
Yeah.
Well, I did not feel joyful. I certainly felt unhappy, but God does command us to be joyful in all times. And so I knew that God had a purpose for Brent. And the rest of that story is that Brent has far succeeded everyone's expectation. In fact, being told that diagnosis, I assumed there were several things he couldn't do, one of them being to read. So he had to teach himself. And one of his friends showed me that he could read one of the kindergarten books that the friend had in his possession. So things like that have happened give me joy. And Brent gives me joy, even though he he
It's
doesn't
often a
like
challenge.
told what to do and often does the opposite. And that limits my happiness at times, but my happiness is surfacey. My joy in what he has accomplished and what is ongoing and very profound.
You know, one of the things that happened just recently, like 2 days ago, is that we were putting him on a plane to go back to California, which is where he lives in a group home. And so when he and Judy were going through the lines of at TSA, and the registration, that identification card that Brent gave them turned out to be an old one, and that it had expired. And so they were not going to let him through. So Brent calls me, and now can you imagine someone who Judy told you at the beginning of the story. So he calls me and he says, "Dad, we got a big problem." Well, just the very fact that he could communicate that. Secondly, that he could say to the TSA people, you know that I'm disabled. And so he is so able to take care of himself in so many ways that we never expected. And that brings us really joy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, part of joy is contentment.
Right. And that's why the Lord says to rejoice in him always. And obviously we know by our age that the circumstances aren't always what we would like them to be. And so there's this underlying joy. Just take Brent, for example. I have so much joy in what he has accomplished. I mean, he still irritates me, and I still, lose my happiness over him because my happiness is temporary, but my joy in what he has been able to do and accomplish in his life doesn't go away.
You know, there's the joy that comes because, God prepares us for what's next. And part of that preparation is our natural talents that he has gifted us.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, it's our spiritual gifts, which we receive when we accept Christ as our Savior and we take a step. And so the combination of those natural gifts and those spiritual gifts is something that we can have gratitude for. And that gratitude is knowing then that God has prepared us and provided for us to be able to take next steps regardless of our age or our circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had a question or two from a couple of our listeners that I wanted to answer before we continue with our conversation. And again, if you have a question for us, just under options and raise your hand, and we'll then be able to connect with you. And so we're just excited to be able to have a dialogue, not just between Judy and myself, between ourselves and you. But here's the first question that we had. What can grandparents do regarding their grandchildren when adult children have left the church. Wow. A circumstance that we see only too often and is very, very difficult to deal with. And so one of the questions and one of the ways to approach coming up with God's wisdom for the answer to that question is, first of all, to identify what's really true. Typically behind a question like this, there's an additional amount of circumstance, which is helpful to understand. So have the children left the church, or have they left your church, or have they left the faith? That makes a tremendous difference.
Oh, it does.
Secondly, the grandchildren, are you in a place where you can connect with them or not? So let's say that your children have not left the faith, they have left the church, all churches, let's say, and they're just not going to church anymore, and you're concerned about your grandchildren. Well, I think there's a couple of different things that perhaps can happen. Number one is ask for the permission from your children. If you haven't alienated them and you aren't in a major conflict, praise the Lord, ask your children, is it okay if they do come to church with you? Because at some level, they probably know that that's a good idea. So that's one direction.
Mhm.
The other direction is that you become their Sunday school, if you wish. And when you have them over, you make sure that you include Bible stories and conversations about Jesus. And so bring Jesus into their lives and pray for their parents. So knowing exactly what's true, and then be able to take one or two of those kinds of actions, I think perhaps would help. Judy, you got any other ideas about that?
Well, I think the most difficult situation would be if the parents don't want you to talk to them about Jesus. That would involve a lot of prayer. How can I, and I think a frank discussion, what would be, what can I, with the parents, would be, what can I say? May I say that, when we go to church, what happens? May I say, how much can we say? And if they're vehement, and we have strong children, although they don't say that, they're Christians too. I mean, they would express and that would be a very difficult situation if they didn't want you to talk to them at all. Talk to the children about what you could give the children, little tokens, or say, I got this at my church, and it's for all the children in my family and things like that. But you have to be very careful.
You have to be very, very careful.
Mhm.
What is it? Well, she is not a person of our faith. She is a person of faith, Dr. Laura. What does Dr. Laura say about relationships with your children?
I forgot. It's been a while since I listened to that.
What she says, if you don't have a relationship with your kids, you're not going to have a relationship with your grandchildren. And so those relationships are really important. And
Right.
we can spend a lot of time talking about that. But the key is to do that. And you can say, I love you, and God and Jesus loves you too.
Mhm.
So what can grandparents do regarding their children when adult children leave the church? There's a variety of different answers, but that would be the right way to approach that. A second question that came in is younger retirees. I love this phrase, younger retirees, that's 60 to 70-year-olds.
Oh,
Yeah, younger retirees and older retirees, that would be 80 and 90-year-olds, seem to have different attitudes. Do you too? And yeah, obviously, as we move through the 3 stages of retirement, and there are that initial stage, say, 65 to late 70s, late 70s to late 80s, late 80s to 104. Yes, we are going to have different attitudes because our cultures will be different in those times.
Bruce, I don't know if it's so much different attitudes as it is different preferences. Attitudes, maybe, our attitude is to love God and love all his people. And so that hasn't changed for me.
Well, that's a good distinction. I think that's worthwhile making.
Mhm.
Thank you for making that. Is that we do have some distinctions. We do have some differences, but our attitude of the fact that Jesus loves us, will have eternity with him. He loves all people and he calls us to be his representative. That attitude doesn't change at all,
Mhm.
but it plays itself out in different ways. So I think that's a really, really good distinction. But there is a difference between a 60-year-old and a 90-year-old. Clearly there is. And so we need to be aware of that. Matter of fact, it is so important that not only do we be aware of it, but that our kids be aware of it, our grandchildren be aware of it, and if they are alive, our parents be aware of it. So we can have 5 generations alive at the same time. That adds complexity.
Absolutely.
Now, Elliot, I think there was another question that perhaps had come in that you can put up on the screen for me. What tips would you have for those who are facing their first Christmas after the passing of a spouse? My goodness, that's
Oh,
a serious. Everything changes when your spouse passes. Judy and I are so fortunate that we've had 60 years together. There's so many of you that don't, and that your spouse has passed. And the circumstance that changes relationships all the way around and makes them, I don't know if it makes them more complex, but it certainly makes them different.
mhm.
And so that first tip on that first Christmas is don't be alone. The first tip is don't be alone. Be with friends. If friends ask you to come over, go.
If they don't, you can ask them.
Can I come and join you? And so to be transparent about
Mhm.
your needs and the fact that that at that time you need to be in a Christian community and to do that together. Maybe a time that you'll be travel to be with, if you have a son or a daughter and their family that you're particularly close to be able to make the effort to go and be with them. I think the very human response is to withdraw.
That's correct. But remember, we must remember God's promise that everything will work together for good. Not that the spouse will come back to life, but the spouse is with the Lord, hopefully, or you will join the spouse someday. Just, we have to rely on, I have to rely on God's promises, no matter what.
And so that's, again, where joy comes in the midst of a really difficult circumstance. And so we have that, we have that challenge also, as I tell audiences all the time, in that, how do I know that God still has a plan for your life? Answer, you're still here. And so the life of your loved one, as strange as it may seem, and whatever the way it is that they departed, could have been in an accident or a long illness, whatever it may be. But in God's timing, he or she is not with you. In God's timing, you are here. And again, that same issue of not turning in on yourself, but having an increasing and growing relationship with God and with those that he's put in your life, either as support or those who need something specific from you.
And I like to make a distinction between joy and happiness.
Oh, sure.
Happiness to me is temporary, very temporary. I like to go to thrift stores, as you know, looking for bargains. And I might find a bargain, and boy, am I happy about that.
A little shot of adrenaline there.
Then I come home and try it on and think, oh, I'm not so happy about this. So happiness is fleeting. It comes and goes very fast. But joy, God commands that we be joyful always. And so that has to underlie everything. So the momentary unhappiness that we feel, we have to get over it, because our joy is in the Lord, and he promises that everything will work together for good.
that does not mean that there isn't the appropriate place for grieving
Mhm.
and for expressing that loss, and for, you know, feeling the change, and perhaps not even quite knowing what to do, but just to believe that in fact that joy is something that can undergird our pain and take us into a
And
new level.
that can be there even though we don't feel it. I'm very joyful about our marriage. It's worked out. We've learned to work together and all the things you need to do to have a good marriage. But there's lots of times, well, there's a few times when I am unhappy with what you do or what you say, but underlying that is that sense, that knowledge of the joy that I have.
Joy is a decision,
Mhm,
and it's something that you can practice
mhm.
and be rewarded. It's not happiness is something that is an emotion that comes as a result of finding the hot deal
Yeah.
at the thrift store. Matter of fact, it's interesting. I have a Bible here, Judy, and this was my mother's Bible.
Mm.
And matter of fact, when I have it sitting on my desk, and it's the Bible that I use on a regular basis. But in the beginning of it here, it says Bible belongs to Grace Heckman Bruinsma, given by Bruce and Judy on December 25, 1996.
Oh,
And so, lasting joy
oh.
that comes to me because I have this. Well, I thought, I better look in the back here. It's a pretty good sized Bible here. And I looked under the word joy,
Mhm.
and there were 16 different references to joy. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 of them from the Old Testament, and the balance from the New Testament. And so I was thinking about that, and one of my favorite verses is I think fits into the conversation we're having, is from the book of James. And so here's what it says: "My brethren, count it all
Joy.
when you fall into various trials, knowing that the enemy of your faith, that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing." When he talks about perfect and complete, lacking nothing, that means that joy is consistent and is there, and that your relationship with him is there.
That's a verse we all need to remember.
Oh man, isn't that the truth? So if you lack wisdom, ask of God, who will give it to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him. And so we have joy. Then I checked out another one, and let me go. It's in. You might write this one down. It's in Psalms 30, as a matter of fact, and in Psalm 30. There we go. In Psalm 30, verse 5, and this is in the New King James Version, but I just love this verse. It's 4, 4 and 5. It says, "Sing praises to who? Sing praises to the Lord, you saints of his." And so, we talk about older people being saints. So, let's just adopt that for this conversation. So sing praises to the Lord, you saints of his, and give thanks at the remembrance of his holy name, for his anger is but for a moment, his favor is for life. Weeping only endures for a night, but
Joy.
comes in the morning. Boy, how right that is. How right that is. The trials, the upsets, and so on and so forth, and nothing like a good night's sleep. And so we go from there, and that kind of leads to a question of do traditions play a role this time and bring joy. And I would think that at least some of them do. Were there any that, that kind of come to your mind that it would be good for us to remind our listeners of, and maybe they have some that they can remind us of?
Well, that's a hard question for me to answer because we don't have a whole lot of traditions. We do different things every year, and we always have. But the family time, the tradition of being together as a family is important to us. Someday, there's not going to be a family. We are going to have departed the earth, and our children won't have us, and so something will be missing. But that's where the memories come of the joyful times and the traditions. And what tradition do we? I want to admit we don't.
I think one of the things that we have is a lack of traditions. And so, in fact, we are very flexible, and we're able to respond to the moment. And there's nothing that we have to do. As a matter of fact, you and I are going to open our Christmas presents without any other family there, and we will then be with family subsequently. But we agreed that we're going to do it at 4:00 in the afternoon, and then we'll have dinner together, and then we'll open some more. So we've never done it that way before.
We never have. And by the time we reach this age, and some of you can identify, there's not much more that not only that we need, but really much more that we want when it comes to material possessions. So our rule this year is that we have to buy ourselves and each other, and we can buy for the family, for the two of us, something trivial or something cheap. And so you should see under our tree are all these presents that we're going to have fun opening on Christmas Eve, because there isn't anything big that we want anymore, but lots of fun.
I think one of the traditions in our family is that we laugh a lot, but that also it's a time to remember that not everyone is as blessed, and that we have the opportunity and the challenge to be able to be God's representative to others, and to be able to find unique and special ways to be able to do that. It's also this time is the year end when, in fact, we, it's many of us will give of the surplus that we have to others, and so making the decisions about the different ministries and that, in fact, we're going to give to. So, giving is a part of the tradition. It's not in the traditional sense that we think about as we always gather around the tree and wear funny hats and do whatever, but that we have that opportunity to be able to bless others as we have been blessed. What a great way to be able to do that.
And to make it a lifelong thing, to find ways to give you joy, like, we're doing this year with our silly and trivial presents. There's nothing big that we want to give each other this year, that we need to give each other, but I'm looking forward to it. And when I look under the tree and see all those packages, I think, boy, we're going to have fun.
We are. So I think embracing some attitudes is maybe that could be considered a tradition. One of the things we do in our family is we laugh a lot, and that's been one of the keys to our relationship is you laugh at my dumb jokes, and I laugh when you lose things, and and so we're able to do that. I remember if we want, maybe we can do a little reminiscing about some of the things from our childhood. I know that, and some of you have heard the story, but that I lived in the Netherlands when I was 7 years old. I won't tell you. Well, yeah, I will tell you what year. In 1947, right after World War II. And so things were pretty bleak over there. Lived there with my family for 1 year in the Netherlands. Things were rationed. So meat was rationed, sugar was rationed. You'd only get X amount of potatoes and so on and so forth. But in Europe, they break apart Jesus' birth and that celebration from Christmas. They do it at two different times. And so they have St. Nicholas, Sinterklaas, who's a long, skinny guy with a with a bishop's hat and a cane, and he has a little guy that helps them and has a horse, and they're the ones that bring gifts, and they do that at a different time. And then then on actual Christmas, they celebrate Christmas. And I've often thought for all these years since I was there that really is I think frankly a much healthier way to do it, because you don't have the mix up between those two different issues of gift giving and personal things and so on, with the real reason for the season, and to be able to do that. So that was a lesson that I learned back then, and that I think about often, and I think would have some value for us now. We were chuckling the other day about in the denomination in the church that Judy and I grew up, when Christmas was on Saturday, what would that mean?
That would mean that on Friday night, we would go to church for Christmas Eve service. And on Christmas Day, Saturday, we would go to church for Christmas. And on Sunday, we would go to church because it was Sunday.
And Sunday night, we would go to church because it was
Sunday night.
So we'd have 4 church services. And then I remember always, I always felt kind of sad for the pastor, because he had to prepare 4 different messages on those, for all those 4 different times. And my dad, and as growing up, he was also the choir director. So they also had to have a choir anthem for each one of those services, or special music of some kind. And so that I always thought, man, that's a lot of work at a time when we ought to be joyful. But that's the call of leadership to bring that. So do you have any remembrances when you were growing up around Christmas or this holiday time that was unusual?
Well, one of them was that we always opened on Christmas Eve, because Santa came early to our house.
Came early to Cleveland?
Right, and when he was coming, when he was there, we'd hear bells outside the window.
Really?
And that would be the clue to go into the bedroom.
Oh, so you and your brother and sister would then head for the
My
bedroom?
aunt and uncle, who were childless, they were always there too. We went into the bed. Oh no, my aunt, because my uncle and my dad, they were big Santa Claus. But then when they'd ring their sleigh bells, meaning that the horse, the reindeer, and the sleigh were leaving, then we could go out and open our presents. And it was great.
You totally enjoyed that.
I think my parents started that because they didn't want us to wake them up so early on Christmas morning. But those are happy memories. And,
talk about gifts. Do you ever remember a particular gift that you were really blessed to receive? Let me share one that I had.
Okay.
My dad was a great musician. I mean, God had blessed him with talents, unbelievable. And I was hiding behind the door when they passed out those talents. And but he always wanted to encourage me to play an instrument. And so one of the instruments that he encouraged me to play, and I attempted to do that for a good number of years, was a trombone. And in the band that I played in, there were 6 of us that played the trombone. And I was always first chair from the wrong end. And so I was always looking for an excuse on why I was such a terrible trombone player. So one of them that I came up with was that I had kind of an old trombone, and that if I had a new trombone, that would make all the difference in the world. And so I continued to make that case to my parents. And so it was our time to open our gifts, and we opened all our gifts, and there was no trombone. So I'm looking at my mom and dad said to me, he says, and the tree was right by a window and there was drapes there. He says, why don't you look behind the drapes? And my goodness, there was a new trombone. I would like to finish the story and say that I then became the first chair and was one of the great trombone players of all time. Tommy Dorsey and I were great buddies, and it really went well. That just wouldn't be true. I was just as bad a trombone player with a new trombone as I was with the old trombone. So
Believe it, because I heard you once.
I know after we started dating, I think the last time I ever played the trombone is my dad got on the piano and I played the Holy City for Judy. And she did share for me. We almost didn't get married. She shared with me that she didn't need to hear that again. So we have all these different, these crazy memories that come as a result of these things. Anything come up for you?
Not along that line, because
You didn't play the trombone.
no.
You were just a terrible.
I took piano lessons for 8 years, but I didn't play that either. So neither one of us had the musical talent that your dad would have loved.
Just to switch from some of the fun stories and some of the background, and we all have those, don't we? But to, really be able to dig just a little bit deeper into the meaning of the season and the amazing reality that in just before the year zero, that it was the time for God's love to be demonstrated, and the fact that he cared so much that he sent his son. And sometimes those words just kind of flow out of our mouth, that he loved us so much that he sent his son, and the rest of the promise that comes with that. But when you really just pause and you think about that, the fact that he not only sent his son, but how he did it, all the different messages for all the years that we're looking forward to that, the two genealogies of Joseph and of Mary coming together at that unique point in time, the point of history where the roads that could take his message of love, forgiveness, and future across the world, to be able to identify the 12 plus others that were attracted to him, and that were able to take that message, and in spite of all the pain and all the suffering and the way many of them died, but that we are here because of that legacy, and that legacy continues. And part of our challenge is how do we continue that legacy? How do we continue that our grandchildren will in fact understand, to know and experience the love of Jesus Christ, to be able to have gratitude for the gifts that he gives us, to be able to recognize that he calls us to be his representative, and that as stewards, the net result of that for us will in fact be an ongoing joy. As a matter of fact, those fruits of the Spirit that we talk about, the fact that we can connect with God, that we can pray, that we have his word. I mean, just the list goes on and on of things that we have to be grateful for, that we need to have gratitude, but that we also need to be mindful of and intentional of passing on our joy. What do you think of that?
Oh, I think that is so true. And we need, how do I say this? For some reason, what comes into my mind as we are talking here is that I don't want people to get the impression that we just automatically got along and that everything has been cool. And we worked on our marriage. And I thank God that because of my belief in him, I thought that if we got divorced, I might go to hell. But that was kind of in the back of my mind. But whatever the cause, we worked on it. And that's why we have the joy. And for those, if there's someone listening who is married and doesn't have the joy of marriage that we've talked about, that's a difficult place. But it's never too late to start, to do. Was never too late for me to start to do my part for any mendings that needed to take place or any revitalization of.
And if you're looking for a place, thank you for bringing that up. And if you're looking for a place to start again, and that you're saying, I didn't really know we could start again. And let us assure you that we can. How do we know that? Because God, through his grace, allows us to start again on a regular basis. That when in fact we don't honor him, when in fact we act or say or think or do something that in fact does not fit into the love that he reflects to us, that we don't reflect that to each other or to anyone else. And that through his grace that we're able to begin again.
Right.
It is from that encouragement, it is from that model that we can. I mean, I tell people often, we've fallen into love probably 4 or 5 times during our marriage, because we change, the circumstances change, the issues change, and so on. And so the stresses and strains that are there in our relationship with God is reflected then in our relationship with each other. And because of his love that he says, no, you can start again with me. I love you and will forgive you. That I can say, I love you and please forgive me, if that happens to be the case. And so it's never too late to experience, to begin to experience into that joy that we talk about. And it is, and what an unbelievable blessing. And how many are missing that? How many in our church are missing that? And maybe one of the reasons why you're connected here is because you are missing that, or you have family and friends that are. And perhaps the ability to be able to refer them to this conversation. It would be our prayer that it would be an encouragement to them. We know that within the church, the seniors, if you wish, are underutilized in many ways. And so the opportunity to, within our church, to be able to connect cross-generationally, to be able to share our stories. In fact, I was just reading that one of the major issues in our family's legacies throughout our country is that the legacy stories of family and the traditions, if you wish, or the way that we've handled special times is because of the separation of the generations, that those stories are being lost. And it is those stories that in fact that bring us reality. Jesus promised his disciples that and those that were going to be writing about his ministry, that the Holy Spirit would bring the stories to their mind, and that they would be able then to be able to put those in a way that we could connect with them. So how much of our life isn't taking the stories of the Bible, taking the stories of the family, taking the funny things and the sad things, and that's what helps create and maintain that joy. So let's not forget our stories. And the seniors, I think, are often you don't have a chance to have most churches do not provide the opportunity for the chances for younger people to be able to hear a conversation like we're having. It's a far-ranging conversation. It covered all kinds of topics. There are some in there that are really important, and some are just fun, but they're all critical in the legacy that we leave. So if we aren't comfortable telling the stories, that legacy will disappear, and the kingdom will not benefit, which is what it definitely should. Trying to think if there's any subjects that relate to joy, or any of the rest of that are listening. If you've got additional questions, we'd be love to take them now. Just want to know that I'm so pleased that we're doing these fireside chats. I'm looking forward to the ones in the future, but this was a special one. When Elliot said to me, a few weeks ago, well, who's going to be your special guest for this time? And I thought, I know who's going to be my special guest, my special wife. And so to be able to have these conversations is just a pleasure. Some of it to remember, some of it to share God's wisdom, and all of it to be a representative of him in our lives and we're doing our best to be able to represent. So Elliot, any other questions? No, we don't. All right. Well, let's wrap it up then. And, oh, remember we were talking this morning, one last thought
Okay.
about that song of when we were kids?
Uh-huh.
I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Down in my heart. Down in my heart. I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Down in my heart today. And there was another verse that went along with it. And probably for this season, it's well that remember that verse too. I have the love of Jesus down in my heart. Down in my heart. Down in my heart, I have the love of Jesus down in my heart. Down in my heart today. All the time. So if your grandchildren are watching that, they're going to say, how hokey is that? But in fact, it is two truths that we can rest on. That in fact, we do have the joy and the love that is available to us, and that we can reflect to each other, and that we can reflect to you. So maybe we could say it together. I think it goes Happy Merry Christmas. Are you ready?
Ready.
Happy Merry Christmas. And may there all be joy to you.